The leadership of the 10th National Assembly assumed its full shape in the week when both chambers appointed their principal officers. Well, between them, 16 principal officers were appointed, 8 from each chamber from both the majority and the minority caucuses. Expectedly, the appointments were not without some controversies and conflict of interest among members, with some alleging strong interference from forces outside of the National Assembly in the selection process, raising very serious concerns about the independence of the legislature. Now, with the leadership positions now settled, what then is next for the 10th National Assembly, and what kind of agenda should the Nigerian people be expecting from their elected representatives? Especially, of course, as anxieties continue to mount over the composition of the cabinet of President Tinubu. Well, the question many have asked is what should be the pedigree of those the president should hire as ministers to drive his agenda of renewed hope for the Nigerian people? Well, joining us now in the studio to help analyze the task before the 10th National Assembly and the much anticipated ministerial appointments of President Bola Tinubu is former African representatives of the World Assembly of Youths, Marvin Yobana. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This week. Right, let's first off, we were told by this administration that it was going to hit the ground running. What's your assessment so far? Because, look, it's how many days to what the Constitution allowed, or allows, if you like, for the ministerial list to be submitted to the Senate.
Yeah.
About 20 days left out of the 60 days allowed by the Constitution.
Yeah.
Let's start from there.
Well, I should say, first of all, I'm pleasantly surprised that with the pace in which the Tinubu administration has actually moved on, because I personally did not expect it to be this fast, because what he has done within this few period, say within 30 days of taking the oath of office, is something that is unprecedented in comparison with the past administration, the immediate past administration. They couldn't do what he's done within 30 days for the past 8 years they were there. So I think I give him some kudos on that. In terms of the ministerial list submission as constitutionally allowed, I think if you look at his pedigree, I'm talking about his antecedents when he was governor, and even now that it's 30 days, if you look at it, you find out that the man thinks positively when it comes to getting the right people to do the job.
But it takes more than positive thinking to get the right people to do the job. But let's go back. Let's go to the beginning. I mean, without a 10th Assembly in place, you can hardly have a cabinet. Yeah. Now the 10th Assembly is in place. I mean, you had all the crisis around the alleged interference, by the executive in the affairs of the legislature. I'd even like to get your thoughts on that first off, before we talk about the agenda before this 10th Assembly, now that they have their principal officers in place. Well,
for the National Assembly, electing their principal officers and all that, I think it's an internal thing that had to do with the parties. Right. For instance, like for the minority, the APC could not bring somebody. Definitely the minority parties had to meet, and those who were more favored had the opportunity to put forth their nominees for those positions that the minority will occupy. Same with the majority party, which is the APC. I think those in the caucuses of the House and at the Senate level could be able to nominate those who they wanted and choose the people they wanted.
But was that really the case? Because, I mean, there was all that talk about interference from the executive. Yeah, and the executive seemed to have had its way, too. The executive wanted Akpabio and Jibrin Barao. They got that. They got Tajuddin Abbas in the lower house, and of course Benjamin Kalu. They had their way. In the case of the principal officers, that seemed to also be the case. And the question that people continue to ask is, how sure are we that from this 10th Assembly we will get this much talked about doctrine of separation of powers, checks and balances, with this level of interference from the executive?
Yeah. The level we are today in Nigeria is something that the executive and the legislative arm of government need to cooperate, because we have been taking that back. And without that cooperation, the policies of the government cannot see the friction of the day at all. Because if you see what happened when Saraki was the Senate president, there was always this friction between the National Assembly and the executive at that point. But in the past administration, despite the slowness of that government, you see that more bills were passed in the immediate past National Assembly because of the cooperation between the executive and the legislative arm of government.
Is it just the number of bills passed, or the quality of bills passed, and of course, more importantly, the impact it had on governance?
Yeah, but definitely, if you don't pass these bills that will impact on the people, definitely it will not be able, it cannot be passed into law, and definitely you could do nothing about it. You saw what happened when in 2015 they tried to pass the Electoral Act, and the steep opposition to that, but it happened in 2022, right? 23, while this administration was there. And we saw the impact it made during the election. People had belief in the electoral system because of the passage of that bill. So definitely that cooperation is very key. And the issue of interference from the executive, I don't see what happened in the National Assembly as a direct interference. I saw a party that wanted to put their house in order.
Right.
And they came together as a people and were able to understand themselves. There was no friction, because if they had had division among themselves, the opposition parties could have united and taken most of those offices.
Recall there was also that issue from the national chairman of the party, Abdullahi Adamu, who actually referred to the list of principal officers as a mere rumor. Of course, I mean, a lot of water has passed under the bridge on that particular issue. Well, from all indication, it looks like things may have settled. But then again, on the other hand, there's some, some voices, that are saying, look, Abdullahi Adamu really is not even speaking for the party. He's overstayed his welcome. I mean, that's another matter entirely. Let's set an agenda for this 10th Assembly. What are your expectations? You say there is a need for cooperation between the legislature and the executive. Right. But to what extent should that cooperation be? And to what extent really, should checks and balances happen? But more importantly, what are your expectations from this 10th Assembly? Well,
what I expect from the 10th Assembly is to ensure that those laws that have already been passed, they ensure that they do their oversight functions to ensure that those laws are obeyed and followed up. Now, and they need to work on the Electoral Act further.
Right.
Now we've seen those gray areas. Taking the report of different observation missions that came into Nigeria, and even the local ones, they've put in their report. And they said, look, if we can handle this, we do this, we could have a perfect election. They need to look at it again. I expect the National Assembly to do that.
Are there specific areas where you would want the 10th Assembly to quickly address?
Yeah, definitely. Like the areas of the electronic transmission of results. It has to be mandatory.
Right.
If we can get that done. But they will now say, okay, are you sure about the telecommunication systems and all that? We could actually agree on something so that nobody can bypass that system, so that there will be some transparency. The issue of those who can vote outside Nigeria, it's very important.
Diaspora voting.
Diaspora voting is very key, and the process of registering to vote is also a very big issue. In these areas, they can look at it and say, what can we do in these areas? And it will help us to ensure that these elections we are holding now, the trust of the people and the confidence they should have in the system is very key. And it shouldn't make it in such a way that it will depend on an individual. It must not depend on an individual. The institutions, like for instance, the power for you to prosecute should be given to an organization, not INEC.
Right.
Because INEC is having a lot on their table. Now, even if you can go further to say,
do you agree with those who say that INEC should be balkanized, for want of a better word right now? that INEC really should be split. It shouldn't, that's too overbearing as it is right now.
Not really split. There are a lot of responsibilities given to INEC that is not actually their duty. Prosecution, for instance, the Constitution is very clear who has to do that. So we need to take some of these things away, and we have special courts. Not only when any election cycle, then we now say, okay, we have other election tribunals and this, and we should have special courts for electoral offenses and all that. You know, these are the things that will make our democracy to get to where we want it to be.
How confident are you that the 10th Assembly will really take, this electoral law passed in 2022, right? That they will actually take it very seriously, especially considering the response that you got from the presidency to the EOM's, election report, the 2023 election report. Didn't go down too well with the president.
Yeah, because
the presidency,
in the first place, we have to think as a people, as Nigerians, because when you always see this international community, no matter we are the ones who invited them to come and do the job, but they always critique everything. They see the flaws we have in our system. Okay, instead of them to support and help us to fine-tune it and ensure that we don't have these flaws before it happens, they wait for us to make mistakes and not criticize us and make us look as if we are not a country.
Do you really expect that these observers, whether EOM or other ones, really should interfere before the process is concluded? I mean, it is. I mean, it's fair to say, look, they came up with this report and said, look, these and these areas where the electoral body and all the different stakeholders dropped the ball. But these are recommendations, some 6 or so points about how to move forward, how to improve on future electoral processes. Yeah. I mean, that's not too...
Yeah, but you don't go beyond, like when you're having a brief, for instance, when we were in the World Assembly of Youth and they invited us to Rwanda, when after the whole thing happened there, when you're writing a report about a foreign country, you don't go to the extent of criticizing things. You make your observations. Those observations are set in such a way as if you're trying to assist, not criticize. You don't take sides. You don't take things from one party and use it in your report. You don't do that. You find a way to balance your report as well as you're reporting exactly what happened. You understand? But when it looks as if you're trying to antagonize the system or try to victimize a nation or blackmail the people, so the government, natural for the government to resist it. Because you see... So
to push back now, which is what the government has done right now, from that body language in itself, and that's why I asked the question, do you think the legislature will actually, take up the issue of the electoral
the flaws we have in the electoral...
Really address those issues?
The flaws we have in our electoral act will definitely be addressed. You know why? You have so many parties who have representative in the National Assembly than any time in the history of our country.
Absolutely.
And definitely, so there are so many vast interests there. So definitely it behoves on their constituents to tell them, look, these are the areas we want you to look at, and let them put forth that and let's see who say, no, we don't want this, we don't want that. I think every legislator wants a better society. Absolutely.
And you think the diversity of this 10th Assembly will really go a long way in ensuring that the right things are done as far as the right laws and what have you, at the end of the day, deliver good governance to Nigerians. You didn't talk about gender laws. Those were jettisoned more or less in the 9th Assembly. Are you expecting this 10th Assembly to do something very seriously about bringing it back on the table?
Yeah, you see, unfortunately, the representation for gender in this assembly is a little bit lower than we had before.
Yeah.
I don't know what could account for that. But I think it behoves on the parties, most especially the opposition parties, to push those policies and those laws that are people-oriented, which includes gender, includes those with disabilities and all that. It is their duty to do that. And if they put forth that kind of thing and seek the collaboration of others, I think it will definitely go far. Because the Senate president is somebody who likes performing. He calls himself an uncommon performer, So I think he likes setting records. He did that when he was in Akwa Ibom State.
Right.
So I think that he will want to do that as a Senate president.
And one of the major things that this 10th Assembly will be doing is to take a look at the ministerial list. Of course, the president has about 20 days, just like we established earlier, to come up with a list of, those that he expects or hopes or wishes will get the job done. Because, I mean, as president, he really cannot do much. His cabinet, the complexion of that cabinet, the structure, the size, and all of that will be a major factor. What do you think, or what are your expectations from this, cabinet that we're hoping for? I mean, so many names are being bandied around and and all of that, but we won't even concern ourselves with that. In terms of size, in terms of structure, in terms of representative outlook, of this cabinet, what are you expecting? What are you looking for?
First of all, is the Constitution, because the representation, like what is spelled out in the Constitution, every state must have a nominee, at least one.
Right.
So definitely that will be taken care of. So, but in doing that nomination, we need people who can perform, not people because of political patronage. You give them this office and they can't do anything with it. And I think that the Tinubu administration, from what they've done so far, shows that they really want to deliver certain things that's differently from what has been happening in the past. And they said they had renewed hope for the country. So I think that renewed hope will make them put square pegs, square baskets, or as it's been said. So definitely, they should look beyond politicians. There are those who are professionals, technocrats, who could assist the government. If they can do the job, why not? Depending on whatever state they come from. So they could appeal to their political friends and associates.
Who are expecting to be rewarded for their hard work.
And give them some other thing. Okay. And if they see something that is very key towards the success of this administration, they should give it to somebody that can perform. That is why sometimes when we talk about, like my state I come from, a lot of names have been branded here and there.
What's your state?
Rivers.
Okay.
Yeah, some names have been branded here and there that they want to get this office, and do they want to get this office as their right, as a political right, or what? So you look at those persons who are going for this and their antecedents and say, what has this man done in the past? So if we give him this opportunity, what will he be able to do?
Right.
The past administration, even that Wike was actually not very friendly.
Now you mentioned that name. Is that the name you had in mind? When
No. I wanted to make a scenario. Okay. I said that Wike was not very friendly to the past administration, the Buhari administration. He was actually hitting them. But yet, that administration came up to recognize him as the best infrastructure governor in Nigeria. I was surprised when they said that. That means even if you do what you're doing and you do it well, even the oppositions and those who don't like you will recognize the fact that you are working.
Am I hearing you say that somebody like Wike, for example, former governor of Rivers State, of course, of the PDP, the opposition PDP, it's out there, the G5 that fought, to a standstill, Atiku, saying, look, it's either the northern chairman of the party, steps down, or we support somebody else, from the south, which is what happened at the end of the day. So you're saying, a Wike, for example, having worked hard in the, eyes of, some persons in Rivers State, maybe it should be people like that should be considered based on the fact that there's a perception that he really did perform.
He performed.
Regardless of what party and all of that.
I think that these nominations for ministerial seats should not look at partisan. It should not be partisan. It should go across. Labour, PDP, APC, wherever. Or even the private sector. Those who are not even politicians. The reason is because we want a Nigerian that is working. So definitely a Wike in Tinubu's administration is a plus. Why do I say that? Everywhere you've put him, he has performed. When he was Minister for State for Education, we all saw what he did with UBEC and everything across the country. As governor of Rivers State, we've seen what he has done. Every local government in my state has projects to show. All right, this is really not about Wike. The argument you're making is, look, antecedents really do matter. They should matter in who emerges, on that ministerial list. Let's talk about the bow and go syndrome that has characterized, picking of,
ministers in the past. Are you expecting something similar? Or do you hope that it will be a major departure from what we've had before now, where, for example, portfolios should be attached to the names of nominees?
That would be a welcome development,
right? And not necessarily this whole bow and go thing. I mean, what's your take on that? Really?
Well, there's a tradition in those who have been legislators in the past that wherever they go into a legislative house for the screening, they give them the preference because they already know they are members of the legislative house already. They're seen as a fellow of the house, so that comradeship and whatever, they say, okay, you can bow and go. But when it comes to professional questioning and things like that, if portfolios were attached, like you said, for instance, education, and you bring somebody who is into agriculture as Minister for Education, for instance, the House or the Senate, wherever, should ask questions. What do you intend to do? This is not your area of specialization. Don't you think you'll not be able to perform? I think these questions are very important. But those questions can only come if you have the portfolio, because you don't know where they're going to put the man. So what questions are you going to ask him? Except there are specific things that you want to clear. So these are the challenges. And I think that, I hope that the portfolios will be attached to the nominees. If that is done, then Nigerians will wait to see.
Don't you think by extension too, it reveals what metal the lawmakers themselves are made of? Because I mean, it's one thing to ask the right question, or to know what question to ask the specific, nominees. And it's another thing for you to get the kind of answers that you're looking for in a way that will guide whether you say, look, this person ticks all the boxes, or yeah, they tick these boxes, but in these areas, we're not too sure that they might be the best man or woman for the job. I mean, don't you think the lawmakers, the legislature itself, should come under some kind of scrutiny in terms of what kind of questions really will be coming from them?
Well,
does it really matter?
It matters when you know what office they are going to give this nominee. It matters. And if you have some information that will help the public or help Nigerians, not for this man not to be cleared, you have to bring it forth. Because if you withhold such information, you are doing a disservice to the nation. Maybe the president did not know, you can bring forth this information and let it be cleared. That is the responsibility. That is why they are elected. So if they don't do that, I would not say it's a failure, because if a portfolio is not attached to the person's name, I say, okay, maybe this guy is an engineer. Maybe he might get some engineering job to do, but you didn't they now say, okay, go and be a doctor. Take care of the health sector. And you say, well, what's this guy going to do here? So these are the issues. But one thing I would like to state clearly here is that the president already has put stopgaps even for these ministers that are coming. If you look at his nominations, those special advisors and technical team, like I call them a technical team he put together, it's like a stopgap that can check what these ministers and all that will do. He's trying to bring in professionals, those who will check to say, look at the area of, for instance, what he did with electricity. Now we can generate our own power, right? Up to 1 megawatts. You can do it privately in your house.
As an individual.
Without license, you can do that. But if you want to go beyond that, you need a license. And this is what Nigerians have been asking for a long time. Now look at what he did with fuel subsidy. It takes somebody with the ball of steel to do that. So this president has shown firmness, courage. He has shown competence these few days. So
for you, morning shows the day, like we say in this part. Let's talk about the idea of a Minister of State, for example. I mean, a lot is being said about the need, whether to, trim down the number of, ministers, or even to enlarge it. Some are saying, look, we might get as many as 42 ministers, not necessarily including the Minister of State. We had Festus Keyamo actually criticize the whole idea of having a Minister of State. He's saying, look, it's totally, idle and unnecessary to have a Minister of State. Wonder what you think about that.
I also think in that line.
And super ministries, should they be split? I mean, like works, housing, of course, there used to be power with that. Should those be split?
As long as you're able to accommodate all the states to have at least one minister, I think is enough.
36 ministers.
Yes, I think it's enough, and the FCT.
And of course the FCT.
So I think it's enough, because this multiplicity of ministers and this and that portfolios, and some of them are dormant, they do nothing. I don't think it's really necessary. And remember that the country has spent a lot of money trying to see how they can streamline the public service, and they came up with the Rusaya report and all that. I think it's time for us to start implementing these reports and see how we can cut the size of governance. Remember, the president said Nigerians should cut down. So I think we should start trimming down the size of governance in this country.
That's where it should start from.
Yeah.
Marvin Yobana, World Youth Assembly, thank you so much for joining us
Thank you for having me.
this week.